Welcome to another edition of Whisper to a Scream. My name is Bernard and I'm going to be your host. This is our special. This is a Independence Day special. So if you hear any cannons going off or a loud sounds, it's because you know how y'all do on the 4th of July. And that's what's going on now. This is our special edition, our Independence Day edition of Whisper to a Scream. Like I said, our ancestors helped to build this country and make the United States of America what it is today, perhaps the greatest nation on the face of the earth. So as you know, our greatest constitutional rights is free speech and freedom of the press. So the following updates are from stories that we've done previously. And as we promised and that we made a commitment to you is that not only will we bring you these stories, but we'll give you updates. We're not just going to tell you these stories and just forget about them. These stories progress, and hopefully most of them get some kind of a closure. And we want to take them as far along as we can, let you know that there's much more than just that initial burst. Now, there's like 4 stories I want to start off with and keep them together because I don't understand exactly what's going on here. Am I being paranoid? So hopefully you all can help me with your comments down in the comments section after we get this. All right, let me just get right to it. The first story is about a black off-duty policeman. And apparently a crime has gone on in his neighborhood. It's kind of culminating almost in front of his door. So he gets up, gets his service revolver, and goes out to help his fellow men in blue, if you will. So he went out. And when they see him coming, they immediately tell him to get down on the ground. He does get down on the ground. A couple of the policemen recognize him as a policeman, and so they ask him to get up and walk towards him. When he gets up and starts to walk towards him, another policeman pulls up. He's just arriving. He's a white policeman. He sees this black guy, and he immediately pulls out his gun and fires on the black guy, and he shoots the guy who's an off-duty policeman trying to help out. He shoots him in the arm. The policeman, of course, goes to the hospital, and I believe he was released. I hope that's the case. But later on, when they talked with this policeman and they asked him why he did it, he said that he did it because he was in fear of his life. Now, if he had looked around, none of the other policemen around were drawing on this guy. Nobody had even was even pointing their revolvers at him. But he said that he feared for his life, and so that police department is calling it friendly fire. Anyway, it makes you wonder, would he have done this if this off-duty policeman was white? You can't help but wonder that. I'm going to slide this over to the Washington, D.C. area. We have another policeman who's also black. And he is in the vicinity near a shopping center where a crime is taking place. Allegedly, the description of the perp, as the police say, the perpetrator, was a black male wearing a hoodie and jeans. Well, this off-duty policeman is wearing a hoodie and jeans. A police car pulls up beside him, and gets out and detains him and starts to pat him down. He's a policeman. He knows what's going on, so he's cooperating. When this arresting officer feels the gun, the off-duty policeman says, "Hey, I'm a policeman. This is my service revolver." Well, he was immediately thrown to the ground. Several other policemen came over and jumped on him. One of them decided that they were going to take their shoe and kick him in the head. Kick him in the head. So of course, you know, he was later on identified, but he went to the clinic, and I believe he was released too. But in this case, along with the first case I was telling you about the guy who was off duty and was trying to help his fellow officers to combat crime, a TV reporter said, referring to the cop that was shot in the first story, he says, they must have thought he was just an ordinary black man. So are you saying if he's an ordinary black man, then we understand how this can happen? That is a scary thought. Moving over to the story I'm talking about now, they thought he was an ordinary black man. So one of the policemen thought it was all right to take his shoe and kick this guy in the head. And you can't help but wonder, Would this have happened if that off-duty policeman was white? It makes you go, I'm just saying. Maybe y'all can help me with this. I'm going to move to the next story, and that's Philando Castile. You probably heard about this in Minnesota. This was a young black man who had a valid permit to carry a weapon. He was stopped by a policeman who, by the way, just happened to be Mexican, and he stopped him. The policeman's name is Geronimo Inez. He stopped him. And in the course of the discussion, he asked Mr. Castile, who was in the car, if he had any weapons. And Mr. Castile said, yes, I have a weapon and I have a permit to carry. So the guy says, well, let me see your ID and your registration. So he was complying. He was reaching for his ID in the glove compartment, wherever it was. The policeman suddenly panicked. He has already got this gun trained on this guy. And when the guy starts to reach for his documents, the policeman panics. And he shoots him 5 times. Boom, 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 boom. 5 times. Mr. Castile dies. Also in the car is his fiance and his young daughter, who's a toddler, and they all see all this. So his fiance has the presence of mind to start taping, video the whole situation. And you can hear her saying, "I don't believe you just did that," but he did. And it makes you wonder, would this have happened to Mr. Castile if he was white? You just can't. At least I can't help but wonder that. Now here's the update on that story. The update on that story is that Mr. Inez, that's the policeman, was found not guilty on all counts. Not guilty on all counts. So along with the video that Mr. Castile's fiance had, there was also a dash cam from the police car, and that cameras seem to suggest that it was the policeman, Mr. Inez, was the one that was responsible for escalating the whole situation. And it makes you wonder about the NRA. Even supporters of the NRA are saying, why haven't they come forth? Because the NRA is always promulgating the legal and constitutional right that you have to bear a firearm. But the NRA has not come out and said anything about the story. That's kind of disappointing to me. And I'm going to move this over. This story is the one that really kind of comes close to me, because the guy in this story reminds me of me and the kind of guys that I grew up with, and the kind of guys kids that I know in my neighborhood now. This guy's name is Jordan Edwards. He's 15 years old. He was 15 years old. He was an honor student. He was killed by a white policeman named Roy Oliver. If you've seen some of our backstories and some of our older broadcasts, we go into the story in depth. But just to let you know that this policeman, Roy Oliver, had just come back from the war, and so I don't know if he was having an episode, because I cannot figure out for the life of me why he would get a high-powered rifle, hold it up, and shoot into a car that's driving away, not knowing if there's children in the car or who's in the car, and just shoots. He ends up killing Jordan Edwards, the 15-year-old honor student. At first, this policeman, Roy Oliver, lied. He said that they were backing the car up in reverse in a speedy situation and in a menacing situation towards him, and that's why he opened fire. But his own police dash cam showed that the car was driving away from the scene. Not speeding away from the scene, but driving away from the scene. The update on that is an autopsy was done on Jordan Edwards, a 15-year-old boy and young man, and turns out he had no drugs and no alcohol in his system. Also, there was no underage drinking at the party as reported initially. In fact, the parents who were hosting the party said that if even one person was caught doing any of those things, then the party was going to be over and it was going to shut down. So this was all just so unnecessary. So the further update is that Mr. Oliver, the policeman, has been fired from that Texas Police Department and has been indicted for murder. But that won't bring back Jordan, of course, but we're going to see what happens with that. So it makes me wonder a couple of things. Number one, doesn't it seem like we need to vet our police personnel a little bit more closely? They need to be vetted more. And number two, don't police personnel need to be drug tested? I mean, when they put on those uniforms or not, that does not turn them into heroes automatically. It turns them into agents who are here to protect the citizens and visitors of this country. And that's what I think most of our policemen and women do. I really do believe that, and that they are really here to serve and protect. But I want to ask them to please take another step in protecting us and getting rid of these hotheads and whoever these people are that are just going wild and killing American citizens seemingly for little or no provocation. So we're hoping that you're going to work to get rid of these bad elements, because it only tarnishes your image and it tarnishes our trust. We got to remember that these seemingly rogue ones, anybody, are human beings just like we are, and they are subject to the same frailties that we are subjected to. So they might be on drugs, they might be abusing prescription drugs, they might be on alcohol. Who knows what they're on? But I think that they need to be vetted more, and they definitely need to be to drug tested. Now, by contrast, here we go. Here's two white criminals in Georgia. They were being transported in a prison vehicle from point A to point B. They managed to get out of their manacles, and they go and they kill the two guards that are transporting them. They kill them, take their weapons, and they leave. And they're missing. They're going missing and there's a search party for them for several days. In the meantime, they're hijacking cars. They are terrorizing people. Known killers. Somehow or another, they managed to be caught with no harm. They're not even kicked in the head when they're caught. They're just handcuffed. Now, what's probably going to happen to them is they're probably going to end up on death row for killing those two cops. But as far as I'm concerned, that's probably where they need to be. It's enough about those stories, but please leave a comment. Explain to me why it seems like if you're black, then you're automatically going to, at the very least, be harassed and maybe even killed. I don't get it, folks. Somebody help me with that one. I'm going to move on, change the subject altogether, and move to something else that's really important for all of us. And this is a story we talked about in one of our earlier broadcasts about the fiduciary rule. Under the new administration, the Obama fiduciary rule was going to be struck down, but they thought better of it. And if they did strike it down, what was going to happen is that finance brokers were going to have room to make profits for their constituents and for themselves, but not necessarily make profits for their clients. That would be you and me. But because, thankfully, this administration decided not to strike that down, the fiduciary rule is in place. It's called the fiduciary standard, and it was put in place as of June 9th, 2017. So what this means is that brokers have to be more upfront. They got to be more transparent regarding fees and commissions, and they got to recommend retirement products that are going to be in the client's best interest. That's what we have going now. So thankfully they kept that part. So now you know, of course, all the financial institutions are going crazy because they may have to end up paying millions in commissions and other fees. Now, having said this, this does not mean that you can go fishing now. It's still going to be incumbent upon you to manage your own financial instruments. Speaking of finances, I just want to bring something to your attention. It's a little side thing on my part. Is that you remember before, if you were to take $10,000 or more out of an account, then you were immediately flagged by the bank and probably the government. And because you took out $10,000 or more, well, now that rule has changed. So now if you take out $5,000 or more, that's about half of what you could before. If you take out $5,000 or more out of your account, then you're going to be flagged. And what happens next, I don't know. If you know, then please leave a comment and let all of us know. Keeping along that theme too of finances, the current administration has been using an old forgotten law called the Congressional Review Act. This law, what it does is allows the incoming Congress, the new Congress, to repeal any regulations or acts that were enacted during the last 6 months of the previous presidency. For instance, any regulations or acts that President Obama made in the last 6 months of his term would be up for repeal with the new Congresses come in, as long as the president or whoever gets a majority vote. And because this is a Republican Party, of course, he's been getting a majority vote. So let me tell you what has been unleashed on us now. Well, one of the laws is that mentally ill people, even people who are mentally ill and are deemed incapable of handling their own finances, can now go into a gun shop or any place else and legally purchase a firearm. And to me, that's crazy. Maybe you see something different, please let me know. And also government contractors. When these contractors get these contracts, they no longer have to follow any kind of rules, civil rights rules, wage laws, or anything. Once they get the contract, it's on them, and they can treat that any way they want to. And it's like their contract, they got it, and they can do it. I don't know. To me, I just think things are going to get unfair, but that's just me. You tell me what you think. Another product of this of the Congressional Review Act is that it is now legal for an employer to hire you and offer you at a lower salary than the guy who is going to be working right next to you doing the same job, who'll be getting more pay. And they can offer you more pay and do it legally, and here's why. If they can show that you have a history of accepting a lower salary in your career, then they have the right to offer you a lower salary. This is going to be particularly devastating to women because historically women have always been paid less than men for doing that same job. Hey, you asked for it, you got it. I'm going to move over to our Why Is That section. We've always had a Why Is That section in each of our broadcasts. We're going to do one tonight and right now. This is the case of an overweight man. I mean, he is obese. I'll try to put a picture up of him. He had a round-trip ticket to Las Vegas. He bought 2 seats so that he could be comfortable. Well, on the return flight, he gets on the airplane. He has his 2 seats. And what happens is that the airline sold the other seat to another customer. And of course he's saying, wait a minute, I bought this seat. But they convinced him that he had no right and that they had the right to sell his seat. So his trip back home was very uncomfortable and very humiliating for him and for the person that had to sit next to him, because we know when we see fat people come on, we say little jokes, we make little snide remarks like, I hope he or she doesn't sit next to me, they'll probably push me, smash me against the wall. You know the kind of thing we say about people who are obese. And he was trying to make his flight comfortable for himself and everybody else, and the airline wasn't having it. I am with Team Big Guy. I think he had a right to both those seats, and to me they had no right to sell his seat. Well, later on they offered him a refund, but that was not the reason that he bought those two seats. And so I'm definitely with Team Big Guy. Let's move on to some good vibration stories. Isn't it about time for some good vibrations? Got a couple of good ones. One is a guy named Andy Mitchell. He spotted a young man, walking along the streets in Texas. The temperature was 95 plus. So he said, and the guy had on like a fast food restaurant, like he worked at a McDonald's or somewhere else. So he decided he's going to stop and give this guy a ride because it was just blazing hot. So he stops, gives the guy a ride, and the little young guy who's in that fast food uniform is telling this guy how he walks to work every day. He walks 3 miles to work. After his shift is over, he walks 3 miles back home for a total of 6 miles a day. Well, Andy Mitchell really felt he kind of felt for him. So what he did is he went home and got on social media and started to get some funds together to see if he could help this young guy, whose name is Justin Corver, by the way. That's the young guy who was walking. In 48 hours, Andy was able to raise $5,500 through his social media. And a car dealership was aware of it too, so the car dealership sold him a Toyota for a very reasonable price. So reasonable that he was able to get the car insured for a year. He was able to make sure there were going to be oil changes for a year, and able to have a $500 gas card. Well, a couple of days later, a day or so later, Andy and his wife and some of their friends who live by waited to see this guy walking to work. And so as he was walking to work, that's Justin. When Justin was walking to work, Andy stopped him. And of course, he recognized Andy because he'd given him a ride. And Andy goes over to him and said, here are the keys to your new car. And the guy was, as I was flabbergasted to think that still goes on somewhere in America. Boy, it was such a good story. So he gave him that, told him that he had, insurance and, for a year, and told him all the good points about him. Said, take the car, it's yours, and go with it. Of course, it turned out to be an emotional scene, and just me thinking about somebody doing that. It's just, what can I say? It's just, that's the America that I think about, most of us think about. This is my last story. This is finally a 10-year-old boy, also in Texas. His name is Bishop Curry V, and he heard about infants who were dying because they were left in cars. We've all heard these stories before. As a matter of fact, approximately 37 children die a year because they're left in cars in these heated situations. He decided he wanted to invent something that will alert people when they've left a child in the car. I'm sure that any of us probably have left a child in the car. Maybe they were asleep and we just forgot. It wasn't negligence. Our mind was someplace else, whatever. So he has made this invention. Right now it's in the design stage, and his prototype right now is made out of clay. And what it does is that it attaches to the infant seat or to a regular car seat. And when the baby is left in the car, it starts to blow cold air, keeping the baby's body temperature down until somebody comes in and relieves the situation. Also, what it does is that it sends an alert to a smartphone, and it'll send an alert to the police, so that somebody will show up and help out this situation. I just want to say I'm just proud of this 10-year-old boy. Right now, he's trying to get funding to make this device for real. So I'm going to put his GoFundMe page up. So if you'd like to contribute, please go ahead. I'm just proud of him and his parents for supporting him, and that we're proud of him and his family for thinking about the welfare of one of our most precious gifts, and that's our babies. So in closing, I want to address this, and that is that America has to address its own problems. If we don't speak up, and speak up honestly and forthrightly about what's going on, if we don't come together as one nation, working through our differences for the betterment of the whole country, then we are going to be allowing outside forces to come in and do it for us. And I mean that. We have got to start working together in the common cause for this country. So I don't care if you're black or if you're white, if you're male or female, if you're gay, if you're straight, if you're young, if you're old, if you're Republican or a Democrat, or you're a Christian, a Jew, or Muslim. If we continue the kind of behavior that this country is exhibiting now, then we open ourselves up, all of us, to be invaded by enemies who would be overjoyed to see America fall.